The first one is a very short clip, which is the ending of John Huston's Reflections in a Golden Eye, and I chose it because I saw it when I was like 15 or 16, and it was the first time I ever saw a film. First time I realized that film could go crazy and could end. It's the ending of the film, and it could end chaotically and inconclusively and things. And this was like a huge revelation for me because I had before then only seen like shitty films and had never thought about it. And the second one is a scene from Orson Welles' Magnificent Ambersons, which I also saw when I was really young, and which at the time I saw it, and I still think it's the greatest scene or moment in all of film. And yeah.
Okay, we'll roll the clips. Maybe let's talk a little bit more about the John Huston film. The whole film is like pretty like gothic and overheated anyway, but this ending is memorably crazy. And
yeah, well, the whole film's tinted gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, you remember this as a very like sort of formative viewing experience.
Yeah, because like I said, I had never really. I just thought movies were just fun or whatever. I had never thought about movies as being like an art form or like something, that wasn't just a predictable pleasure-giving thing. And then I went to see this movie because I heard that it was weird and gay, had gay stuff in it. So that's why I went. And it was just I'd never seen anything like it. It's like it's very over the top and melodramatic, and it's all gold and everything. I was kind of interested in it, but then this ending, it's hard to see without the whole film because you sit through this really long film that's really kind of like strange and a mess and kind of overly cerebral and stuff. And then suddenly Marlon Brando just walks in this room and shoots Robert Forster, and then the camera just does that thing where it goes back and forth, and then it just fades out. And I don't know, it's just being the age I was, which is like 15 or 16. I just couldn't believe that a film, like a real film, could do something like that. I'd never seen like the camera move like that, or like the camera, like that the film could just take over, and the aesthetics of the film would just like, and that the story just becomes like secondary to kind of what the film did, and that it could end just completely chaotically like that. Like there's no ending; it just ends with confusion and oddness, and so that was just I'd never seen anything like that. So it just kind of blew me completely away to see that films could do something like that.
So, like, how does this map over your sort of discovery of, literature, like interesting literature that's important to you? Because I've heard you talk about that also as like, you were reading. You said before this you were, watching whatever trashy movies or movies that were just entertainment, and you had described literature, what you were reading that way too, until you discovered, I think it was Rimbaud and French poetry and French literature. So at what stage was that? Was it around the same time?
Yeah, it was all around the same time. I think I saw it. Yeah, I just read. I only used to read novelizations of television shows. That was what I was obsessed with, like Batman and Man from U.N.C.L.E. and all these shows that were popular then. And then I just because I read an interview with Bob Dylan in Rolling Stone or something, and he mentioned Arthur Rimbaud, and I said, "Oh, Arthur Rimbaud." So I bought it, and then that was completely mind blowing to me because he was, my age and writing all this visionary stuff and, promoting, a completely visionary anarchic life and stuff, and all that that completely I just couldn't believe it. And so then from him I just started obsessively when I was a teenager reading French poetry like Baudelaire and and then Genet, and I was just began consuming that stuff. And then there's Sade, who was very important to me. And then around the same time, also film. So it was just this awakening to me of that you could actually, I don't know, because I'd always I wrote like just terrible, since I was a kid, I wrote these terrible poems and stories and stuff. And it just, I don't know, it just made me want to do that, the usual thing. It made me want to be an artist. And then I wanted to be a visionary and, experimental monster guy.
So, so this seeing Reflections in a Golden Eye, like, what does that do for your relationship to film? Like, what kind does it change the kinds of films you seek out? Do you start reading like film criticism. I mean, this is like late 60s.
Yeah.
So like, you know, it's like Andrew Sarris and Jonas Mekas and Pauline Kael are publishing, and I mean, it's a pretty like healthy period for a lot of cinema, really, like world cinema and American cinema too. So what happens after this?
I don't think I started reading criticism until much later. It took me a while to get there, to find that stuff, because you know, I mean, I had no contact with that stuff. But I had some friends in school, especially this one friend of mine who was a lot like me, and he was really, really interested in experimental music and, you know, John Cage and things like that, Morton Subotnick, and so we sort of like ganged up together and started exploring everything. So from this, we started going to see, you know, all those films of the late '60s that you would go see, like Antonioni and Bergman and Fellini, and because that stuff was playing, and so we would just get in our car or borrow our parents' car and drive down and watch those films. And then I just got completely obsessed with that stuff, and I sort of lost all interest in sort of pop kind of mainstream films and stuff. I don't even, the only film I can even remember ever going to before that period was I went to see a movie because the Three Stooges were there in person. So I went to see a Three Stooges movie. Yeah.
And The Magnificent Ambersons, when did you see that? And
similar time, a little after. And yeah, that just, I mean, I really, really like Wells. And again, that was beyond the Reflections on a Golden Eye. That film, Magnificent Ambersons especially, was really powerful. It's just that, I know that scene just really stayed with me because it's doing so many things at once. That's what I really loved about it. It's so multiplicitous. It's like, really sentimental, and yet it's very cruel and mocking, but it's also not, I don't know, it's cruel in a way that's not cheap or something. And then just the idea of, like, you know, having this moment where he has his most profound thoughts, and he just goes through this sixth grade science class idea of creation, and then that the thing that kills me is just that, and then Orson Welles just blacks him out. You know, it's like. Right. The end, and it's like that the film, again, like I said, it's just that the idea that the film could make a decision like that and could just like crush him, you know. Mm-hmm. It just, I don't know, it made me want to make art, because I've always been really, really interested in how art, I always want my writing and stuff to do as much as the story or the content. It's always important to me that the writing is doing a huge amount of the work and stuff, and so it just kind of made me understand that you could do that.
Mm-hmm. When you sent us your list of films, I was really struck by the choice of these two. I mean, you know, a lot of your work is experimental, formal, you know, both in your writing and in your filmmaking. And so, but to have you choose these like two classical Hollywood guys like John Huston and Orson Welles, it was like, is classical Hollywood like kind of something that you like a lot? Is it like, are you steeped in it in any way, or?
No, not really. Yeah. No, those were just standouts to me. No, I mean, you know, I was interested in what was happening in Hollywood film to a certain point, but I was never interested in like film history or anything. I was always really interested in what was happening in that moment. So, you know, like I was watching, you know, whatever, Sam Peckinpah or something. That was what was interesting to me. So.
Right. So let's move on, because we have a few clips to get through. Should we do the Frampton next? Or do you want to do the Bresson? It's you. Let's do the Frampton. So, okay. Which is since a very, very different type of film, Hollis Frampton.
Yeah, this was just. Los Angeles was really. I grew up in Los Angeles, and there was at that time a really strong. There was a venue, or a couple of venues where they showed experimental film and experimental and abstract film that was going on at that time, and you would go, and they would usually have the filmmakers there, and so I used to go, and my friend and I got obsessed with just going to see every week or every 2 weeks, however they showed them. So I saw like Stan Brakhage and, you know, Hollis Frampton, and, you know, just all those guys would come and show their films, and this is like in the late 60s and early 70s. And I was really, really, really taken with it, just really. And I was predisposed in a bit because I was really interested. I'd always been really interested in psychedelic music, and also I was doing a lot of psychedelics, and that probably helped too. But Hollis Frampton particularly interested me because he was doing. When I was 15, I decided I was going to write this great project, this avant-garde, gigantic project, which ended up being the George Miles cycle, my first 5 books. And I was really, really interested in that idea of writing some huge project that you would commit your life to and just do this massive thing. And Hollis Frampton at that time had an idea to do this film that was called Magellan or something. And it was going to be 36 hours long. And he died before, I think he only got 12 hours before he died. But he would come to Los Angeles occasionally and show the latest clips. And none of them ever connected up in any way I'd ever seen. And they were just so strange and exciting to me. And so I just picked a clip. This is a clip that was a short piece. They're all in small pieces. This is a piece of the Magellan film that he never finished. So I thought I'd show it.
Okay, we'll show the Frampton now. At the time you discover work like this, Frampton, Brakhage, these sort of experimental structural filmmakers, like what's going on with your work? Is this the period where you're writing poetry?
Yeah, I mean, mostly at that point I was trying to write fiction. I wrote poetry, but I really wanted to write these novels, right? But I was extremely, extremely, extremely bad and had no skills. So I would get very frustrated because, it was really, as bad as you would imagine a 16-year-old who wanted to be Rimbaud would be. And so I was working on both, and eventually I ended up doing poetry more in a present way, and because I got a little bit better at poetry. So, but I was thinking about fiction mostly.
I'm not sure really how to talk about this, but I'm curious about this question of formalism and how it translates from like one medium to another, because I feel like you're somebody who draws a lot from the formalism of like non-literary forms in some ways, but then you're also very much like a literary formalist. And I can see, some of these like I can see that like Frampton in your work, so I'm wondering how something like that is absorbed by, a younger you and like sort of becomes writing.
Well, at the time I was trying to do really, really experimental fiction. It was as experimental as Hollis Frampton. So there'd be repetitions of things that were recognizable, and then a lot of rhythm and a lot of just kind of like effects. And I was very interested in the rhythm of it, of like for instance that. So, but something I realized like at some point was that I really have to have this kind of emotional thing in it for me. I can't just do abstract work. So I started having to realize I had to have some kind of narrative and some kind of emotional pull. Otherwise, I wasn't interested enough, and there was nothing there of me. So, but I always, most of the stuff I honestly think most of the influences I have that have been really important have been other than writers. And like I said, when I was watching all those experimental films, that was very important, and certainly in music too. I'm always studying other mediums, trying to find things, because fiction's very, very slow, and most fiction, barring European fiction and French fiction, which is the stuff I really love, the kind of visionary writing, like Guillotin and stuff like that, is really based in plot and character and the character's journey and psychological development. I don't like any of that stuff. That's all. I just employ that stuff to kind of use as a grab or something. So it was hard to find things in literature that were really helpful. You could get it from people like Burroughs or something. You could get a little bit, but so then it was better to look at film and look at music and things, because they had different requirements. It was like the thing that, I guess there's the pop song, and then you go from the pop song to, whatever, Metal Machine music or Autechre or something. And but I just felt like it was such a different structure. The structures they used were so different, and the expectations were so different, and the formalism was a completely different kind of formalism than fiction, with the repetition and the choruses and things. And I just was always trying to find a way to do that in my writing, just to, I don't know, I guess those appealed to me so much more, because I'd never studied fiction. I just did it myself, and I didn't want to use those structures like plot and all that stuff. So I was trying to find a way to do it the way they did it, because it was much more appealing to me.
Right. Were there you talked about the French sort of literary influences, like were there experimental writers that were important to you, other than you mentioned Burroughs, but like, was there anybody else you were reading at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading everything I get my hands on. So I read, I mean, and mostly I was interested in European fiction, like, so yeah, Genet and Roussel, and but a lot of it hadn't been translated yet. So I mean, like Bataille and Blanchot was especially really important to me, but he wasn't really translated into English until like the 80s. So Céline and just anything that was like that would be really exciting to me, and poetry a lot, because poetry wasn't moored with all that stuff. So yeah, I could read Apollinaire or whoever, and kind of that kind of stuff. So, but there were some Americans. I mean, there was some Americans, and I was really interested in metafiction. So John Barth and all those guys, because they were at least trying to do something unusual. But American fiction just doesn't. It's extremely. You can count in one hand the people before recently that were actually really trying to do something kind of visionary.
Mm-hmm. You talk about just this idea of formalism, like, but an abstraction but you also needed like this emotional component. Like with these experimental films of that period, did you find that there was an emotional component for some of these films, or were you more drawn to them as like formal experiences?
I think I was most interested in them as just I was studying them, so the formal stuff, but I suppose there's something emotional about that.
Sure.
The Hollis Frampton, yeah. and there's something emotional about Brackage, for instance, and in a weird way, even in people like the Kuchars and stuff, there's like some kind of strange thing. So I did really like when I saw that, because I was trying to do both, and it was very interesting when you found them together. But at the same time, I was mostly just studying it, just looking for formal stuff that I could learn from. So I guess that was mostly what I was paying attention to. But the introduction of that stuff into when it was there in film, and then and I liked René and all those guys, and they obviously had more of that kind of stuff in them. The more kind of Antonionian things they dealt with that stuff.
So all the people were talked about are these experimental, avant-garde, like filmmakers of a certain period. I'm wondering is this still an area of cinema that you're interested in, that you keep up with? Because
yeah, super interested.
Any recent experimental works that you're? Well, we're gonna talk about James Benning later, but there's
a whole kind of, I think there's kind of a renaissance of young experimental filmmakers, and there's a lot of journals and things that actually cover that work. I mean, I just recently got to know Scott Barley. I mean, he's a good example of someone doing that. He's involved with these. He has a kind of group of these filmmakers he's involved with, who are like in Canada and South America and things, and they're doing really abstract and very experimental film. And I think there's actually something really happening there, and I'm very, very interested in that work. Yeah.
Watching something like the Frampton, I actually think of a little bit of like this is a bit of a detour to the present, as your GIF novels. Yeah. In a way.
Yeah, I was thinking that when I saw that too.
In terms of like just, yeah. Can you? I don't know if everybody's read your GIF novels. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you've been working on lately, and why you decided to do that, because it's essentially a form that you invented.
I guess so. I wrote this novel. The last novel I wrote that was called Marbled Swarm, and I was extremely happy with it. It's like, I think it's my best book, and I was able to do all these things in it that I'd always wanted to do. But every time I finish a novel, I always always kind of destroyed my voice and started anew. And so I was going to do that, but at the same time, there was something about what I was able to do with the Marbled Swarm that I wanted to continue with, but I didn't want to use that voice. I thought that voice, I'd really maxed out what that voice I could do that I used. And I just kind of stumbled into this thing of making fiction using animated GIFs. I just came upon it accidentally, kind of, because I have this blog, and I was really interested. I like animated GIFs, and I was stacking them up on just like a thematically, like chandelier, and then I'd have like 50 chandelier ones, and I started to notice these things that were happening between them, these really interesting accidental kind of formal things, and so I started deliberately working with them, And at some point, I realized like that I was actually writing fiction, and it was exactly the same as writing written fiction. I mean, I was using exactly the same principles I did, and I got really excited, and I'm still excited about it because I'm really interested in like getting rid of that stuff I don't like, you know. And if you use animated GIFs, I mean, I use found animated GIFs. I mean, you literally cannot put plot and character and stuff on the surface because it's just impossible. So you can make that stuff, but it's really deep, and it puts everything kind of on the same plane. So yeah, I started making these novels, and they're like books, and they have paragraphs and everything, but they have animated GIFs that are kind of combined into groups. And yeah, I've done 4 of them, 2 novels and 2 books of short fiction. And I mean, I really think they are novels. I know that people don't, but because I literally I write them like novels. They're really written like novels. So yeah, that's been huge. And
were you thinking of like structural and experimental film when you were doing them?
I wasn't. I was trying really, really hard not to think of visual art, because I really don't want them to be visual art, because I'm not a visual artist. And I wasn't trying to think about film. I was really literally trying to think only about fiction. I was really like making myself do that. So I think there are things that come in, you know, that came in from this stuff, that work. But no, I mean, I was really, really, really thinking this is fiction, and only thinking about it as fiction. I mean, later on, after I started making them, I started realizing that I think a lot of some of the basic things I was doing in them came from John Baldessari, because I was really a big fan of John Baldessari's work in the 70s and 80s, and I suddenly realized, like, oh, I think this is really somehow at the root of my interest in this.
One thing you said last night that was striking to me was that, you know, in terms of like the division of labor between you and Zac on the films in terms of writing and on the set, you said that you have a hard time visualizing narrative, which you know, you've done these GIF novels, which are, even though you say you're not a visual artist, that there is certainly like a visual sensibility at work, and I think your work resides like, it's so close, adjacent to like visual art tropes and devices in a way that I'm wondering why you feel like you have a hard time as a screenwriter and filmmaker, like, you know, that the visualizing of the narrative is something that you are not.
I just
comfortable
don't.
with?
I mean, I don't know why. I try, and I try to think about. I mean, when I'm writing the scripts with Zac, I mean, I'm thinking about it as a film. I'm thinking about how it'll be visualized, but I literally just cannot do it. I can't think of like, this scene should be this long and this cut should be this angle, and I can't do that. I don't know why. It's just I don't have that in my brain. So Zac has to do that.
Okay, let's do the next clip. This is a Bresson film. Maybe not the Bresson film everybody's expecting, but.
Robert Bresson. When I saw Robert Bresson's films, that like changed my whole life, and he's like the most important artist to me. And I wanted to show Bresson clip because of that. And the first Bresson film I ever saw was Lancelot du Lac, which is kind of a funny one for him because it's a period piece and it's not what he usually does. But it's the one that made me kind of just go, oh my God, you know, I have seen it. You know, that is it, and it exists, and that I don't need to see anything else, kind of thing. But there's this one scene in Lancelot du Lac, which is it's a medieval one. It's like King Arthur and shit. And there's this jousting scene, and the way he shoots, that's what I'm going to show you, is this jousting scene. The way he shoots it is just so wrong, and it's so mechanical, and it just drives me crazy. So I thought it might be a good way to look at how his films are structured, because if you try to show a Bresson film, I'd have to show you like, you know, 40 minutes for you to get the kind of Bresson thing. But you get it consolidated into this scene, I think.
Okay, we're gonna roll the clip. I was rereading the interview that you did with the Paris Review some years ago, where you said when you discovered Bresson's films, you found the final ingredient you needed to write fiction. Yeah. So, what was that ingredient?
Oh, that's hard. Well, you know, I mean, I was trying to write. I mean, and I guess I did write about like really, really kind of difficult things. The access of sex and violence as a way to access kind of really confused and inexpressible emotion and things like that. That's kind of been a key for me. And I could never really figure out how to do it nothing really I wasn't able to find a register that I felt comfortable in, because I'm not interested in sadism or masochism or any of that kind of stuff. So I was just trying, and then Bresson. There was just, when I saw that, I was just the kind of there are just a million things. It's hard because there's so many things about it that affected me, but just the and it really isn't so much in that clip, but just kind of the opacity of the characters, but they're just all emotion and it's inaccessible, and he only uses non-actors, and so they're like not worthy of the roles or something. And I always wanted to write novels where the characters were not strong enough to be characters and things like. There were so many ways in which I and the flatness of it, like that was flat but deep. And so there are just many things about it that just clicked. It was just like, oh, this is how I can do this. If I can really figure out how to do what Bresson did and apply it to what I'm doing, then I think I can do this thing I want to do.
So you saw this film not long after it came out. This was from 1974, I think.
I saw it. It was a little bit later than that, but I saw it at Filmex, which was this film festival. It was a great film festival, but it wasn't. I don't think it was brand new. So, because it wasn't so long after that I saw The Devil Probably, which was the one that was really important to me. But yeah, so it was in the mid 70s. It might have been 74. It could have been 74.
It's interesting you picked this. And I, as somebody, I also think late Bresson is like genuinely great Bresson, and I mean, I'm not sure if everybody agrees with that. I mean, Susan Sontag said, a lot of the like really canonical important writing on Bresson actually happened like at the turn of the 60s, early 70s, like Susan Sontag and Paul Schrader, and like that was as he was making the switch to color, and Susan Sontag actually said like she could not imagine a Bresson film in color. And like I think like his greatest films are the ones in color.
Yeah, me too.
So do you want to say a bit about The Devil Probably? You've written about this, I guess, and I remember the piece that you wrote, and I think it was Art Forum after he died.
Right.
And you said I think you wrote to him.
I did write to him.
What did you tell him?
Oh, I was really into him, and then I saw this film, The Devil Probably, which is my favorite film, and if you've ever seen it and you know my work, you would understand why that is. and it just was like, I don't know, just kind of like, I don't know. I don't think I ever recovered from seeing it. And I became just obsessed with, I wanted to work with him and I wanted to learn from him, and so I wrote letters to him. I found an address for him and wrote letters to him and saying, please, I will like sweep the floors of your sets. I will do anything if you will just let me come. Turns out he didn't speak English, so that didn't happen. But yeah, I just wrote a bunch of letters, and I really was just like, I promise I'll be really quiet, and I'll just like stand over in the corner, and I just want to watch you work, and extremely long, passionate, insane letters that that no one would ever respond to. So yeah, I tried, but it didn't work. Yeah.
And then from those two films, you went back and watched all the others?
Yeah. Yeah, they weren't that easy to, there wasn't
at the time, yeah,
DVDs and things. So yeah, no, I eventually saw everything. Yeah, and then I kept, I went forward. I saw, La Charlotte and stuff. So, but yeah, I ended up just seeing them all somehow, and I don't know, I guess video or something. I don't know.
You is his book, his legendary book, Notes on Cinematography, important to you? I think
extremely
you use a quote from it. I think it's an epigraph in Try.
Yeah.
Something about concealment, right? I think it's about what
the
actor
I can't remember the
is.
exact
Something
quote.
about what the actor
Yeah.
gives you is not what they.
Yeah.
Is what they hide.
The thing that's important is not what they show you,
but what they hide,
or what they don't, or what they hide,
they don't
but
know
what they
too.
do not suspect is in them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's key, and that's even key to Zac's of my films, even though.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are there other things from that book? Because, I mean, that I also like reread that book recently, and it's like it's kind of amazing. It's like kind of like one of the best film theory, the best and most readable like film theory book like ever written in a way, But it's
I agree.
Like what other things that you've taken from it in.
I haven't looked at it in quite a while. So I mean, I studied it and memorized it at some point. So I mean, I mean, there was nothing in it that didn't hit home with me. It's just about, I just use it as a kind of manual to think about how to make characters and how to make work and things, because I disagreed with everything he said.
So we're going to jump ahead and show one more clip because I want to leave time for some audience questions as well, and we'll take some questions after the next clip, which is a clip that you're in. So
Yeah.
you want to set this up?
Yeah, I just thought that it would be like amusing or something if I showed you the clip. It's like the only acting job I ever had, and it was in this French director Christophe Honoré. He made this film called Man at Bath. In English, it's called Man at Bath. And I knew him a little bit, but at that point, and he asked me if I would play a part in his film. It's an improvised film, so yeah, it's all improvised. And he asked me to play this part, which was it's set in the suburbs of Paris, and the part I play is this guy who lives in a housing project in the suburbs of Paris, and I collect art, really bad art, but it's not supposed to be bad, I think. And then the French porn star is very famous in Europe, at least, named François Sagat, is the person I'm in the scene with, and he plays this young guy who comes up to me occasionally to have sex with me for money. And Christophe wanted me to play this scene, and it was improvised, although he told me kind of basically what he wanted me to do, what the scene would be like, and he told me he wanted me to really shock François Sagat, because François Sagat comes to me for asking for sex, and this isn't in the clip, but just before, this other boy leaves my apartment, and I found a new boy, and I'm not interested in François Sagat anymore, and so I reject him, and he wanted me to really get François Sagat upset, which is because François Sagat is not an expressive person. So, and he wasn't very expressive in this either. Believe me, he was really angry at me. And still, when I see him in Paris, he looks at me like he wants to kill me, because I call him on some things that he's very self-conscious about. And so anyway, that's the scene, and it's improvised, but I did like kind of make notes and have a kind of idea in my head. So, but Francois did not know what I was going to do. So, and this is the scene.
So that was improvised?
Yeah. Except for he told me to say, "I bet your fiance loves Charles Aznavour." I didn't. That wasn't me.
Like, how many times did you shoot that scene?
Huh?
How many times did you shoot the scene?
3 times. 3 times.
Okay.
But I think that's the first one. He wanted to... the Francois stuff is all first take, because
right.
He wanted Francois to be really pissed off, so... Yeah. But he might have used... For the close-ups of me, they might have been, like, later or something, so I had to, like...
Right.
They're slightly different every time I said it.
We're actually showing Christophe Honoré's new film in the New York Film Festival in a few weeks. Very different...
Yeah.
kind of film from this one, but it's. I just wanted to ask you too about just being in France and working in France now and making a French film. And when did you move there?
2004.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't intend to move there. I thought I would just be there for a while, but I got kind of just. I liked being there, and so I just ended up staying.
Did you find the conversation about your work is different there? Or like just how it's framed and
yeah, I mean, it's like I don't get the like you're like a like a sadistic horrible boy fucking monster over there.
Mm-hmm.
They see what I do as being part of a tradition. I mean, it's like they don't, that doesn't mean they like it, but I mean, it's not like I'm like a really big, hugely successful artist in France, but they don't do that. They critique they'll critique it based on usually what I intend it to be critiqued about, instead of just saying that I'm a monster or something.
So I wanted to just make sure we have some. We have one more clip, which is what we're gonna end with. But I wanted to just make sure that we have some time to take some audience questions. So if anybody would like to ask Janice anything about anything really, we can take a couple.
question. So Dennis, like
Jeff.
You were really good in that clip. I've never seen the film, right? I'm not trying to flatter you. No, just think so. And it seemed like it seemed like the voice of your novels, you know.
He wanted that. He wanted me to do it, not just because he thought I was like a handsome guy or something.
But you also look pretty great in it. So no, I'm kind of curious how you access that since
For the scene. He wanted me. We talked about it. I mean, he said, "Do what you want, and this is what I would like you to upset him." And I think I said to him, like, "This is what I'm thinking of doing." And he said, "I want you to do something where, I want, I mean, he wanted me to be meaner. He wanted me to be more. I was not being very cruel, and so he said, "Why don't you do something where you want to hurt the kid you're sleeping with or something?" He said, and I said, oh, "Okay." So then I just brought that into it because he really wanted that. So yeah, I don't know. It was fun actually. It was fun. He said I was his Robert Mitchum, Christopher Ray. But no one else. I was only his Robert Mitchum. No one else ever asked me to act again. No, I just mean that that's like it's not a tradition in American fiction to be really to abandon all of the strictures, the kind of mainstream or conventional strictures of fiction. So yeah, I mean, Burroughs, Kathy Acker. Who else? I'm probably blanking. Not many. That's only two I can think of at the moment. I mean, now there's different. I mean, there's some younger writers who are doing it. There's some younger writers who are doing some really wild stuff. Yeah, but that's still metafiction. It's still like kind of, yeah. I mean, Sheeper by Irving Rosenthal. He only wrote one book that was like that. But it's just not a tradition here. It's just like it's not. There's no history of it. So other than that's why. So that's why when I started publishing books, it was always just like the new Burroughs. It was like because there was nobody else to even though I write nothing like Burroughs. So I don't know. But there's a lot of really interesting, very daring work being done by younger writers right now. But I can't think of others. I'm probably just blanking though. Yeah, this film there was the movie is called Like Cattle Towards Glow. It originated 3 or 4 years before we actually made it as a porn film because I'd always wanted to write a porn film because I thought that I could make a really visionary and great porn film. And somebody heard me say that it was in the porn industry and said, "Oh, I can help you make that. I can get it financed and Falcon or somebody will put it out or something."
Could you say a bit more about that? About why you wanted to make what was it about pornography?
Well, I've always been really interested in pornography. It's like it's one of the things I study, and I think because it represents sex, because the way it represents sex, I'm interested in how sex is represented in different ways. And so yeah, no, I mean, I just.
But was this something that specific that you would want to do in a porn?
Yeah, I want to do like a
challenges maybe the language of porn.
Yeah, I just felt like it was really. I just felt like it was it was this medium that no one had ever really exploited. There was like kind of experimental porn. I don't know straight porn. I only know gay porn. So, but there was kind of some experimental gay porn in the 70s and things, but it was really not very good. And I just had this idea that like nobody's ever done this, and I can do it. I mean, I'm gonna make the Citizen Kane of porn and all this, and it's just like ripe for that. And I just went on and on about that for a while, and then somebody finally heard me. So I did. Or he said, I said, well, what are the rules? And he said, oh, anything you want. Just do anything you want. I'll get it made. So I wrote this very, very strange porn film that had, there were all kinds of scenarios that were too weird, and the sex wasn't sexy. It had pornographic sex in it, but the sex wasn't erotic. And so he just said, no, I can't do this. So that was the end of that. But then years later, this producer, Jürgen Bruning in Germany, who's best known for making Bruce LaBruce's films, he heard about this somehow, and he wrote to me and he said, I'd be interested in looking at this script. At that point, I was collaborating with Zac, and we were working on projects, and I just said to Zac, would you be interested in doing this with me? And he said, yeah. So he read the script, and we both thought there were a lot of problems with the script. So we revised the script, and then we sent it to Jürgen. And he said, oh, I'll make it. So we did, and then he raised money, which turned out to be $40,000, which was very little. So that's from start to finish. So it just seemed like a situation where we could do whatever we want. It's like a film. It still has this. It's 5 sections. Each section has different characters, different performers, different storyline. They all connect up kind of thematically through the idea that the center of it is sex or sex act or wanting to have a sex act or something, but the sex is not presented as sexy, and then we just got more and more complicated about it, and we have the way it was cast was a friend of ours who's actually the casting director for Christophe Honoré, because Christophe Honoré was one of the producers of the film, whose film you just saw. He did this thing called wild casting, and which is basically he went around to nightclubs at 3 a.m. and on the metro, and he just would see guys and say, like, do you want to be in a movie? I'd be like, oh, okay. So then we had all these guys come over and we cast it, and they'd never been in anything before, or they'd never acted or anything like that before. Most of them weren't even in that area at all, and also a lot of them did not speak English very well at all. And the film is in English, and the dialogue is kind of complicated and elliptical, and we wanted them to not really understand what they were saying, because we wanted to have really awkward performances, because we had this idea that you could then see them and not see the performance, and just create all this awkwardness. Anyway, so in each section is in a completely different style, and we're gonna show one of them, which is my favorite scene from it. It's in the exact center of the film. And I don't think you really have to be set up. It has sex in it, so if that bothers you. But it's not pornographic. It's not sexy. It's pornographic, but it's not sexy.
All right, so thanks a lot, Dennis.
Thank you.
And we're going to end with this clip. So thank you all for being here.